a whole nativity set outside of their house. Like, it's just, you just never really know what goes on behind closed doors. And it hurts my heart.
Police arrived to this Roy neighborhood around 10 o'clock this morning when they learned a 2-year-old boy was in cardiac arrest. Police say the boy had obvious injuries when they got there.
Some jobs are like gloves. They only fit certain hands. If you've got a temper that flares like a wildfire, maybe don't sign up to be a babysitter. Channel that rage into the ring, become the next Tyson Fury, or step into the WWE arena where fury is your currency. But babysitting? That's a realm for the gentle, the patient, the kind. It's a world of lullabies and tiny hands, not clenched fists and broken spirits. Yet somehow Roy found himself in the wrong role, and the consequences were nothing short of catastrophic. "I'm deeply sorry for the trouble I've caused," the letter read, its words dripping with regret. Too little, too late. "I wish I could take it all back and should have stayed home, but by the time Dunn penned this confession, the damage was irreversible. 2-year-old twins, innocent, fragile, trusting, had become his victims. One boy, gone forever. His twin sister clinging to life, her tiny body bearing the scars of his unchecked rage. His excuse? Anger issues. A feeble justification for an unforgivable act. Anger issues? Try a life sentence. This isn't just a story. It's a chilling exploration of how one man's misplaced fury shattered lives. What drives someone to harm the most vulnerable? What darkness festers in a person who can look into the eyes of a child and see anything but purity? The answers are as unsettling as they are elusive. But here's the thing. This isn't just about Dunn. It's about the choices we make, the roles we take on, and the devastating ripple effects when we step into the wrong ones. So why are you still here? Because you know there's more to this story. Because you feel the weight of those unanswered questions pressing against your chest. Because you need to know how it ends. Don't switch the channel. Don't let ignorance win. Stay tuned. The truth is coming, and it's darker than you can imagine. Welcome to Detective Jeffrey Crime Station. A huge thank you to our amazing subscribers and viewers for joining us on this journey into the world of true crime. We're honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us, and we're grateful for your trust and support. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date on our latest captivating stories. Your engagement means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more thrilling and thought-provoking content with you. The December sky hung low over Roy, Utah, a small town nestled against the Wasatch Mountains. Christmas lights twinkled from eaves and windows, promising joy and celebration, while inside one particular home on that cold winter evening, a darkness was unfolding that would forever tear apart the fabric of a family and shake an entire community to its core. Jonathan Allen Dunn, 37, stood in the living room of the modest suburban home. Outside, neighbors went about their holiday preparations, unaware of the malevolence brewing just yards away. The chilled winter air carried sounds of distant laughter and Christmas carols, creating a cruel juxtaposition with what was happening behind closed doors. The twin toddlers, just 2 years old with matching cherubic faces and eyes still wide with the wonder of a world they were only beginning to explore, trusted the man before them. Why wouldn't they? He was a family friend, someone who had been welcomed into their home countless times, someone the parents had trusted with their most precious treasures. In their innocent minds, could they have possibly comprehended the monster that lurked behind that familiar face? "Let's play a game," Dunn had suggested, his voice betraying nothing of what was to come. Did his hands tremble as he spoke those words? Did some small part of him fight against the darkness that was rising within? Or had he surrendered to it long ago, in quiet moments no one had witnessed? The living room, with its scattered toys and the lingering scent of dinner, transformed into a chamber of horrors as night descended on December 23, 2023. What began as playtime spiraled into a nightmare that defies comprehension. The twins' laughter turned to whimpers, then to desperate cries that echoed through the house. Did they call for their parents? Did they plead with a familiar face now distorted with rage? These questions would haunt their family for years to come. Dunn's fists fell upon the small bodies with increasing fury. "I was hitting them harder than I should have," he would later confess, words that carried the weight of understatement so profound it bordered on the absurd. His knuckles connected with soft flesh, creating constellations of bruises across tiny backs, sides, and chests. The sickening sound of impact filled the room as the children's cries grew more desperate. His violence evolved with cruel creativity. Rough fingers pinched delicate skin, seeking out the most sensitive areas of their bodies, including their genitals. What perverse satisfaction did he derive from their pain? What broken pathways in his mind translated their suffering into pleasure? The twins' terrified eyes reflected the betrayal of trust, so fundamental it would alter the very foundation of their understanding of the world. The bedroom, meant to be a sanctuary of dreams and comfort, became a theater for Dunn's escalating brutality. He hurled the children onto the mattress repeatedly, their small bodies bouncing against the surface, their tears soaking into the bedsheets that would later become evidence. Did they understand what was happening to them? In their developing minds, could they comprehend why someone they knew was hurting them so badly? A Nerf gun, designed for childhood play and harmless fun, became a weapon in Dunn's hands. The foam darts struck the children first, a twisted parody of the toy's intended use, before the hard plastic butt of the gun became a bludgeon. The dull thud of plastic against flesh and bone echoed in the room as bruises bloomed beneath their delicate skin. The closet door frame, an innocuous architectural feature in any other context, became another instrument of suffering as Dunn pushed their heads against it. The sharp edge connected with their temples, their foreheads, adding to the constellation of injuries mapping their abuse. Their cries grew weaker as the night wore on. Was it exhaustion from the ordeal, or were their bodies already beginning to surrender? In a final act of calculated cruelty, Dunn employed what he described as a hard foam mallet to strike each child in the back of the head multiple times. The spongy material belied the force behind each blow, as delicate brain tissue collided with the interior of their skulls. Did he know then what irreparable damage he was causing? Did he understand that with each strike he was shattering not just bone and tissue, but futures, dreams, and lives? As the clock ticked past midnight and into the early hours of December 21, the violence subsided. The house fell into an uneasy quiet, punctuated only by the soft whimpering of the traumatized children. Dunn, perhaps recognizing some fragment of the horror he had inflicted, administered Tylenol and cough syrup to the twins. Was this an attempt at care, or was it merely a calculated effort to suppress the evidence of his savagery? The children, their bodies a canvas of abuse, were put to bed. In the darkness of their room, did they find any comfort in sleep? Or did their injuries keep them in a state of semi-consciousness, drifting in and out of awareness as their bodies fought to heal what could never truly be repaired? The dawn broke cold and clear over Roy. Light filtered through windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and the stillness of the home. Between 8:30 and 9 a.m., Dunn noticed the boy, little Aleister, had stopped breathing. The child's chest, previously rising and falling with the rhythm of life, now lay motionless. His skin, already marked with the evidence of the previous night's violence, had taken on a bluish tinge. What thoughts raced through Dunn's mind in that moment? Did panic set in as he realized the consequences of his actions? Did he consider fleeing, constructing alibis, or destroying evidence? Or did he simply stand, paralyzed by the reality of what he had done? For approximately 1 hour, 60 minutes, that could have made the difference between life and death. Dunn did nothing. The clock on the wall ticked away precious seconds while Aleister's twin sister lay nearby, her own injuries threatening her young life. What calculations ran through Dunn's mind during that hour? What internal negotiations or justifications forestalled the call that might have saved a life? Finally, at approximately 10 a.m., Dunn called 911B1. His voice, recorded for posterity, reported a child in cardiac arrest. Did it tremble with fear or remorse? Or was it steady with the practiced calm of someone accustomed to concealing monstrous truths? The morning air was shattered by the wail of sirens as emergency vehicles converged on the home near 1950 West, 4450 South. Neighbors emerged from their houses drawn by the commotion, their faces registering confusion, then horror as they began to piece together fragments of the unfolding tragedy. How could such evil exist in their midst, on a street where children played and community flourished? When officers arrived, they found a scene that would haunt them for the remainder of their careers. Aleister lay unresponsive on the front porch, his small body already taking on the stillness of death. Inside, his twin sister was discovered on the couch, her face a map of pain marked by visible bruises. The contrast between the cozy domestic setting and the brutal evidence of violence created a cognitive dissonance that was almost physically painful to witness. Based off of the injuries observed by officers on the scene, there was a suspicion that they were injuries sustained from an assault of some sort, police spokesman Stuart Hackworth would later explain to reporters. His professional tone masked the visceral reaction experienced by every first responder who entered that house. How does one maintain composure when confronted with such stark evidence of human cruelty? The twins were rushed to the hospital, lights flashing and sirens wailing through the streets of Roy. Medical professionals, trained to deal with emergencies of all kinds, were nonetheless shocked by the extent of the injuries they observed. For Aleister, their frantic efforts came too late. Despite the application of every medical intervention available, the young boy succumbed to injuries consistent with physical abuse. His final moments on earth had been filled with pain and terror. How could anyone reconcile this with any notion of justice or fairness in the world? His sister, though alive, was found to have suffered a brain bleed, along with extensive bruising throughout her body. Emergency surgery was performed to relieve the pressure on her brain, but the question hung in the air like a pall. What irreversible damage had already been done to this young life? Would she ever recover from the physical trauma, let alone the emotional scars that would surely follow? Meanwhile, police began the grim task of documenting the evidence and interviewing Dunn. In the sterile environment of the police station, did the full weight of his actions begin to settle on his shoulders? Or did he retreat into denial and self-justification, the way so many perpetrators do when confronted with the magnitude of their crimes? The investigation revealed a detail that drove the horror to new depths. There was evidence of sexual abuse to both children. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and added another dimension to the already unfathomable cruelty. What darkness resided in a soul capable of such acts? What twisted pathways of thought could lead someone to violate the innocence of children in such a fundamental way? As news of the tragedy spread, the community of Roy rallied around the devastated family. A fundraiser was quickly established to help cover funeral costs, medical bills, and therapy for the surviving children. Our sweet Aleister passed away at the hands of a complete monster, the fundraiser stated, giving voice to the collective grief and outrage that enveloped the town. The family, thrust into a nightmare beyond comprehension, released a statement that spoke to their shattered world. We as a family are grieving the devastating loss of sweet Aleister and the severe injuries of his twin sister. As we attempt to put our lives back together after this unbelievable tragedy, we are choosing to honor Aleister's life and memory as we process our grief. How does one find words to express such loss? What language exists that can adequately contain such pain? As the investigation progressed, another disturbing fact came to light. This was not Dunn's first offense. In 2017, he had pleaded guilty to child abuse after breaking the arm of his then-girlfriend's 2-year-old child and causing bruising to the child's face. He had been sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison, but was discharged in December 2021, just 2 years before he would commit these new, even more horrific crimes. This revelation raised agonizing questions about the systems designed to protect the most vulnerable members of society. How had Dunn been released after serving such a short portion of his sentence? What evaluations had determined him fit to re-enter society? Had there been warning signs that were missed or ignored? And most painfully, could Aleister's death and his sister's injuries have been prevented? Other children had been present in the home during the abuse, not related to the twins, and were taken into state protective custody. What had they witnessed? What sounds had penetrated the walls of their rooms as the violence unfolded? These children, too, would carry the weight of that night, their young psyches burdened with memories no child should have to bear. Following his arrest, Dunn was charged with aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated sexual abuse of a child, and 1 count of aggravated child abuse. His case was considered a capital felony, potentially carrying the death penalty. The severity of the charges reflected the unconscionable nature of his crimes, but could any punishment truly fit such a transgression against innocence? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel as a means of encouraging us. Thank you as you do so. The legal machinery ground forward with methodical precision. Evidence was cataloged, witnesses interviewed, medical reports analyzed. Throughout the process, the community held its collective breath, waiting for justice to be served. Parents held their children tighter, casting wary glances at neighbors and friends. If Jonathan Allen Dunn, trusted family friend and caregiver, could harbor such darkness, who else might be wearing a mask of normalcy while concealing monstrous impulses? On August 13th, Dunn pleaded guilty to the charges. Part of his plea deal included taking the death penalty off the table, resulting instead in a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision sparked debate within the community. Was a lifetime behind bars sufficient punishment for such depravity, or would the slow passage of years in confinement, with the memory of his crimes as constant companions, be a more fitting retribution than the quick release of death? The courtroom on the day of sentencing was a study in controlled emotion. The air was thick with grief, rage, and the desperate need for some form of resolution. Dunn, now facing the consequences of his actions, offered what appeared to be an apology. "I'm sorry for what I've done, and it haunts me every day, and I hope one day the family can forgive me for what I've done." His words hung in the air, examined by each person present for signs of genuine remorse. Was this a man truly haunted by the memory of his actions, or were these practiced phrases calculated to create an impression of repentance where none truly existed? Could someone capable of such sustained cruelty against children truly comprehend the magnitude of their sins? The family, seated together in their shared grief, found no sincerity in his words. Kari Miller, the toddler's aunt, rose to address the court, her voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "Jonathan, you are the epitome of evil, and our family will never forgive you for the damage that you have done and the evil acts you have performed to these sweet, innocent babies." Her declaration carried the weight of absolute certainty. There would be no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no healing of the breach his actions had created. Some wounds are too deep, some violations too fundamental to ever be absolved. In the hierarchy of human transgressions, what Dunn had done occupied a place reserved for the most unconscionable acts, those that sever the perpetrator from the community of humanity. The surviving twins' ongoing struggle was brought into sharp focus by a letter from her therapist, read aloud in court. The young girl suffered from nightmares, her sleep punctuated by terrors that no child should know. Most disturbing of all, she had begun hitting herself in the head, a heartbreaking echo of the violence inflicted upon her. What memories resided in her young mind? What associations had formed between love, care, and searing pain? As indicated by her therapist, we will never know the full effect of that brain trauma, said Letitia Toombs from the Weber County Attorney's Office. The physical injuries might heal with time, but the psychological damage would continue to manifest in ways both predicted and unexpected for years to come. Two futures had been irrevocably altered. One ended before it could truly begin, the other forever shadowed by the events of that December night. He took two happy, healthy 2-year-olds and destroyed them both, Toombs continued, her professional demeanor barely containing her disgust. The statement cut to the heart of the tragedy, the transformation of possibility into pain, of potential into loss. What might these children have become? What dreams might they have pursued? What loves might they have found? What contributions might they have made to the world? These questions would remain forever unanswered, possibilities snuffed out by one man's incomprehensible actions. Judge Noel S. Hyde, tasked with the solemn duty of pronouncing sentence, delivered a scathing assessment of Dunn's actions. This is not a mistake. This is not an accident. This was not anything other than intentional depravity. There are no words that can adequately describe the level of depravity that this circumstance evokes. With those words, he articulated what everyone in the courtroom felt: the fundamental inadequacy of language to contain or express the horror of what had occurred. How does society categorize or respond to actions that exist so far outside the boundaries of human decency? What framework can possibly make sense of such deliberate cruelty inflicted upon the most defenseless? The gavel fell, and Jonathan Allen Dunn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was led from the courtroom in shackles, his future now constrained to the confines of a cell. Would the years of incarceration bring him to a genuine understanding of the magnitude of his crimes, Or would he remain locked in the same twisted mentality that had enabled his actions in the first place? As the crowd dispersed from the courthouse, stepping out into the sunlight of a world that somehow continued to turn despite the horror they had confronted, each person carried with them a piece of the story. Parents returned to homes where they would hold their children tighter. First responders sought ways to process what they had witnessed. Friends and neighbors of the affected families searched for words of comfort where no adequate comfort could exist. The community of Roy continued to heal from this tragedy, but the scars would remain, invisible in the increased vigilance of parents, in the expanded resources devoted to child protection services, in the memorial garden planted in Aleister's name. The collective innocence of the town had been shattered by the revelation that monsters don't always hide under beds or in closets. Sometimes they walk among us, disguised as friends, waiting for the opportunity to reveal their true nature. For the surviving twin, the journey of healing would be long and uncertain. Would she ever remember her brother, her playmate, her other half? Or would he exist for her only in photographs and stories told by those who had known him? Would she ever understand the full story of what had happened, or would protective silences shield her from the worst details? These questions would unfold over time, their answers revealed in the slow process of growth and understanding. For the parents, the questions were even more agonizing. How does one continue after such loss? How does one trust again after such a fundamental betrayal? The day-to-day acts of living, waking, eating, working, sleeping would continue, but forever altered by the absence of their son and the changed nature of their daughter. The milestones that should have been celebrated in pairs, first day of school, graduations, birthdays, would now be marked by the glaring absence of the child who should have been there. And what of Jonathan Allen done? In the solitude of his cell, with nothing but time and memory as companions, would the full horror of his actions finally penetrate the barriers of whatever distorted thinking had enabled them? Would remorse, genuine and consuming, finally find him in the dark hours of the night? Or would he construct new narratives to protect himself from the truth of what he had done? These questions found their answers in the cold reality of justice. What drove Jonathan Allen Dunn to commit such heinous acts? Perhaps only he truly knows, but the court determined it was nothing short of intentional depravity, a diagnosis that offers little explanation but delivers a stark judgment. Would he face the ultimate punishment? No, he would instead spend the remainder of his life in prison with no possibility of parole, a living reminder of the consequences of unimaginable cruelty. And would the family ever find closure or peace? As Kari Miller stated with unflinching clarity, forgiveness would never come for the man who had inflicted such evil upon their innocent children, but perhaps, in time, the sharp edges of grief might soften enough to allow for joy to re-enter their lives, not replacing what was lost, but existing alongside it. A testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of even the darkest tragedy. The story of Aleister and his twin sister, one gone too soon, one left to carry on, would become part of the collective consciousness of Roy, Utah. It would be whispered among parents as they discussed childcare arrangements, referenced in trainings for social workers and law enforcement, remembered in quiet prayers and moments of silence. Their story would serve as both a warning and a call to vigilance, a reminder that the protection of innocence is a sacred trust that requires the commitment of an entire community. In the end, the questions raised by this tragedy are answered not just in courtrooms and sentences, but in how we as a society respond to the knowledge that such darkness exists. Do we retreat into fear and suspicion, or do we move forward with greater awareness, stronger protections, and renewed commitment to safeguarding the most vulnerable among us? These are the questions that remain for each of us to answer long after the courtroom has emptied and the headlines have faded. Questions that remind us of our collective responsibility to ensure that no child suffers in silence and no monster goes undetected behind a friendly smile. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. Because you did, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to show your appreciation. Additionally, tap the notification bell to be kept abreast with our latest videos and ensure you don't miss out on any new content. This will keep you informed about our upcoming true crime stories and allow you to stay engaged with our community. Thank you once again. Your support means a lot to us.